The last 2 decades in education in Africa have been marked by improvements in access to education. In some places, we've seen the doubling of numbers. The number of African children enrolled in primary school since 2000 has increased from 60 to 150 million. And the number of girls in school is now close to equal the number of boys. However, we still lag far behind in terms of improvements to the quality of education. And the World Bank, in a report in 2019, dubbed this the learning crisis. On Edtech Monday this month, we look into the challenges in improving the quality of education across the continent and the role that education technology has in this particular space. My name is Julie Gishuru. It's a pleasure to be with you. Welcome to Edtech Monday. On our panel this month, we're very happy to have Laike van der Wiel, the Deputy Regional Director, Eastern and Southern Africa of UNICEF. Also with us, Akinwale Goodluck, Head of Sub-Saharan Africa, GSMA, that's a global system for mobile communications. And the Minister of State for Primary and Secondary Education at the Ministry of Education in Rwanda, Gaspard Twagirayezu. So as we kick off the panel, we've heard about the gains that have been made, and we all accept the challenges and the gaps in the quality of learning. And so let's start with the simplest question. Why are we facing these gaps? What needs to be done? Minister Gaspard, let me begin with you.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you, everyone. The question you just asked is actually that classic schooling versus learning problem, right? So if you look at the numbers that we have in Africa, we have done fairly well in attracting kids to schools, right? So if you look, for instance, in Rwanda, our net enrollment rate is above 98% for primary. But then again, the question remains, if we have these kids to school, then what do we do, right? So how do you make sure that they have a very meaningful experience once they get there? And if you look at the challenges that we have in our education systems, many of them are due to actually those numbers of the students that we have in our classrooms. So it is very good that we have all these kids in school. It is very good that we continue to strive towards education for all, but we also need to do more in ensuring quality once the kids get there. So if you quickly look at some of the main challenges that we have, and one would include school readiness for younger kids, right? So because if you look at the numbers, most of our kids have their first experience when they are entering primary school, right? So which means this is where they meet their peers for the first time when they are around 6 or 7 years old. And this is when they have to learn other foundational skills like reading and counting for the first time when they are at 6. So school readiness is still an issue. And the second problem is large class sizes. So imagine a kid, it's their first experience in school, and they are around 50, 60, 80 in a classroom with a student, with their teacher. So that is also a problem. And then there is also inadequate teaching and learning setup, and this is going to include some of the teaching materials and all the things that the kids need to have access to. And of course, another big issue would be on teachers. So the teachers, because of their level of training, also motivation, but also because they have now to manage like those large class sizes and in an environment that is not always adequate, right? So, but I think the good news is we have solved the first part of the puzzle, right? So because now the kids are at school and we at least know some of these challenges that are preventing these kids from having an adequate experience. Now that we know all those challenges, I think what we should do as educators is to try and look at each of the challenges and see what's the challenge that we can tackle at first and make sure that we progress with the rest.
Lika, let me get an overview from a UNICEF perspective on this same question. What are the challenges and where are the gaps that you see?
Thank you, Julie, and also thank Minister Gaspar to actually lay out already the foundations, because I think, of course, the gaps, they change over time. And now 2020 and 2021, unfortunately, they have pointed out yet again to some of the gaps that we've seen in the past, and they will stay with us much longer because of kids not going to school. We managed in the last decades to get the kids to school, and that went well. I mean, I think they went in big numbers. They went on time because that was in the beginning also quite difficult. They were always over age. They dropped out. They came back. There was no continuation of learning. So that has improved over the years. Having said that, of course, going and being in school is not enough to have the learning process be fully developed. And there's many other inputs that need to go hand in hand with having children in school and having that physical infrastructure of a school. And these are it was also said, capacitated teachers, motivated teachers, but also new approaches to learning, to have kids be more active in their own learning, to have support of the parents when they learn, to have formative assessment, so you can have immediately a feedback loop when a child is not learning enough or it's learning in the wrong way. But that takes a lot of resources, because it's not only resources in terms of, okay, you have all those extra teachers, but you also need a culture change. You need to train the teachers differently. You have to have in-service training. You probably need coaches for the teachers to sort of guide them into developing a new lesson plan. There's many components, and that takes really a lot of time. And in a way, it's almost a culture shift. Now, there are issues, even if you have those kids in school, there's, of course, many disparities. So I would say that many of the kids who had that protective and positive environment, they probably learned quite well. It was exactly what the minister said. If you had a huge school, not enough teachers, the teachers were stretched, they did not have the latest updated training, and it was almost impossible then to have the same learning outcomes as we expected on paper. And I think that disparity has stayed with us, and we've been trying with all of us and all ministers of education across the continent, UNICEF, other stakeholders, is really to invest in the schools that were lagging most behind. Because also don't forget, the minister talked about early childhood development, and it's true, if a child comes into school, the learning starts. But of course, those kids have been exposed to learning at home, social learning, exposed to books, to educational programs. And if children have had less of that exposure, of course, they already have sort of a further distance. They are more disadvantaged than the kids in urban areas who even have a preschool. So in that regard, investment in areas that are most disadvantaged is absolutely key to bridge that gap that we've seen in normal circumstances in terms of learning.
Thank you for that. I come to you, Wale, now, and having heard this from Gaspard and from Lika, I think the question really is, what is the role of technology in addressing these gaps and challenges, and what can stakeholders like yourself, and what are stakeholders like yourself doing in this space?
I think the challenges with education and the possibilities of Edtech, I think it's like a marriage made in heaven. With the increasing prevalence of mobile connectivity in Africa, smartphone penetration going in the right direction, educational innovation, and just the sheer proportion of mobile-related apps developed and developed for education, it just tells us that there's a big opportunity for us in sub-Saharan Africa to bring technology to drive the change that we want in education. When I look at the GSMA Mobile Industry Impact Report, it's very clear that the SDG for quality education is the second most impacted SDGs by mobile technology. Today, we have in excess of 1.4 billion mobile subscribers using their phones to advance education or education of their children. So there's so much to be achieved. We've seen the impact of COVID-19 on education. We've seen the stats. I think Leka mentioned that we've got so many children out of school. The numbers go from 250 to 300 million children are out of school. We've also seen what the impact of COVID-19 has been on education. We've seen between 250 and almost 300 children being out of school. The fantastic thing about the technology that is available today is that it is multifaceted. It works at different levels. It works for those who have internet, and it works for those who don't have internet. It works for those who have very sophisticated devices, and it works for those who have feature phones. It works for low-tech offline channels like voice, IVR, SMS, USSD. These are channels that don't necessarily need a broadband connection and can still deliver education using Edtech to our children in sub-Saharan Africa. We've seen a lot of great examples. We've seen ENISA providing education in Kenya, in Ghana, in Ivory Coast. We've seen Prep Class in Nigeria reach about 30,000 children. So things are really, really happening with technology.
Wow, I'm excited. The way you put it, Wale, I'm so excited. So Gaspard, let me come to you. And you were just about to take us into examples and through some stories. And so I come back to you for that. And also just to connect as you do that, what do you see as the opportunities that technology offers? Wale has really taken us into this, but more from you on that. And please, the examples that you were about to share.
Thank you very much. And as Wale just said, technology is really enabling us to do things that we were not able to do before, but also maybe the things that we did not pay too much attention to before, right? So because mostly schools have been these four walls where a teacher comes in and they teach and the kids go home and that's it. So, but if you look at what has been happening with education, especially in Rwanda, we have been investing technology even before COVID hit. So we have been investing in content. We have also been investing in platforms, learning platforms for these children, right? So, but we still have a long way to go if you look at the access part of it, right? So, because if you think about education in technology in education, I tend to think of it as that happening in two places, right? So, and one is in the society in general, and the other part is in school, right? So, and technology has the power to help our kids learn wherever they are, right? So because now with technology, all the barriers have been lifted. So which means if a kid is at their home, they can, if they have a mobile phone, they can use it. And in Rwanda, we have also tried other different delivery channels. We have tried television, we have tried radio. So which means if a kid was in an area where there is no, or if their parents did not have a phone or a computer, they could listen through radio. Others could catch their lessons through TV. So, and this is an environment where we have tried to say, let's take learning out of classrooms and take it into the community. So, but now that kids are at school now, we are trying to see how can now technology enrich the experience that was already happening in classrooms, right? So, and now we are working on increasing access to devices and connectivity. and this is very important. But we are also increasing content, like quality content, content that is interactive, and to make sure that the content that we have in our schools is appropriate, but is also interactive. And you have seen that this is helping, especially for kids who have to learn foreign languages. So technology has been helping in correct pronunciation, but also we have seen that technology actually helps in distributing lessons. For instance, you can have a chemistry teacher who is very good, but they can only be in one place, right? So, and with technology, this teacher can be a teacher for everyone, right? So, and this is something that we have also seen being very important. So, but as we increase access to technology, access to connectivity, and access to quality content, we cannot leave other classic solutions behind, like reducing class sizes, right? So because even if you have technology in school, you need a teacher who is able to have a manageable class size so that they can help the students. So, and also another facet that we are seriously looking at is how do you invest in the awareness in the community in general, right? So because if a kid is at home, in school, they are learning, but if they go home, they need someone to help them, right? So they need someone to help them with the homework, so which means as we look at technology in the classrooms, we should also look at technology awareness in the community, because now we all have to come together to support that learner. So these are some of the few things that we have been doing in Rwanda, but we also recognize that, you know, the journey ahead is still long. But we are glad that we have been working with partners like UNICEF, like Mastercard Foundation, and they have been really helping us in terms of content, in terms of access. And this is something that we are planning on continue strengthening, because we cannot go back on these lessons. And the only thing that we can do is keep progressing and keep investing in these lessons. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You know, the Mastercard Foundation, as you mentioned, is in this space. We have the Regional Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT, which is housed in Rwanda. And we're working with a lot of people in education and technology to really see, you know, what role can we play in this space. So let me pose this question. And Lika, I'll come to you first on this. You know, inclusion is critical. We don't want to leave gaps. There's so much to be done. How can partners like us, yourself, private sector, what roles do we all have to play to ensure that government, to ensure that we are contributing meaningfully to inclusion, access, and increased quality of learning on the African continent?
Thanks, Judy, for that question. Yeah, because you're absolutely right. There's just not one particular actor who can do it by him or herself. It's not business as usual, right? We have to do things differently. We have to invest differently. And I think we all need to chip in to make sure that the investments are synergized and going towards those issues that you mentioned: access, inclusivity, and quality of learning. And of course, there's different ways of looking at it. I think to have all schools connected, maybe we always think technology, okay, internet connectivity, that is one really big aspect of this learning, because connectivity gives you not only access to more information, right? Because you can go to Wikipedia, you can do whatever, you can look for information, you can understand what sources are being used for what information. So that connectivity gives you an insight to the wider world, but it also makes sure that children are learning the skills, because it's a balance between content and skills. And if kids are much more comfortable in using technology, surfing the web, knowing what sources to trust and what not, that contributes to their own learning. They become an active actor in their own learning. So these are very basic principles, and it basically means that we need to put a lot of extra energy in the communities where this doesn't happen automatically. So I guess some of the urban areas, middle class, this is happening automatically. While where it comes to even some of the rural communities where there's not even electricity or trustworthy electricity, it needs much more of a bigger infrastructure to bring that connectivity to that particular school, one, and then get the kids from the homes to that school to be connected and to have access. And I think there, of course, infrastructure is one big aspect, but it's not the only one. But for sure, investment in terms of connectivity it's a big one. And UNICEF is working with the private sector, of course, with the governments, because they're the main actor in this all, through a GIGA project, we call it, to get as many schools connected as possible in this continent. So this is step number one. And this is basic, but it's an important one. Now, then I do think to make sure that we capitalize on everything that technology has to offer, that of course the content needs to be developed across by different providers, and the curriculum it's very important and needs to be the core of it all. But then there's different ways that, for example, right now the technology in the private sector are offering some content that can be done much better in a much more educational manner. And I really would appeal to the people who have that innovation, even when it comes to gaming, to really make sure that the kids learn something positive out of it, right? So I would say that's on the content. Everybody has its own responsibility to provide quality content and really make sure that if kids are then, once they're connected and engage with games or chatting or whatever it might be, that it's a learning process. And they really, not only learn skill and connection, but they definitely know more after they stop finishing the game. That's the other thing. Then number three, allow me, I'll take one by one. The other issue I do think, and the minister and Wale also mentioned that, of course, it's a community, right? It's a community effort. It's not an individual child that will do all the learning. And I think there, the parents need to feel comfortable that their kids are learning through technology and through access, but they can also protect their children, because we all know that even if you have children not guided, especially when they're younger, but definitely also older kids, that has also protection issues. And if you give parents that empowerment, that they understand the connectivity and how kids are on the use technology, that they can also protect the children better. They understand and they can learn together. And again, I think here the gap and the divide is important, because this probably happens quite automatically in an urban middle class setting. It's exactly where the internet and the technology is not as infiltrated, where this kind of protective environment might lack. And I think it's all our responsibility to make sure that it's there for all those children.
Wale, let me come to you now, staying with the whole idea of what roles do we all have to play in this, right? And your ecosystem, looking at that. But I want to take it a little bit of a step further and just ask, we talk a lot about African solutions for African problems, relevance and really doing things that make a massive difference. What do you see in your ecosystem? What are some of the major things that could contribute to big shifts and that you'd like to see players in your space doing?
Thank you very much, Julie. Technology is a barrier buster. We've seen great investments in coverage, and we've seen how investments in coverage and in broadband have translated into becoming factors for education, for financial inclusion, for digital inclusion. So we're on the right track. There's still a lot of work to be done. We need, for instance, content. Like I spoke about content, we need relevant content, we need appropriate content, we need content in local languages. We tend to mix literacy and with the inability not to be able to speak English or French in sub-Saharan Africa. We tend to say, well, if somebody is illiterate, probably means that person can't speak English or French. But the reality is that if we invest in local languages, in local content, we can still develop a great crop of leaders in sub-Saharan Africa without them being labeled as illiterate just merely because they can't speak French or English. For the technology side, we have the opportunity to deliver education for those facing financial instability and cultural barriers. And Africa is challenged, Sub-Saharan Africa is challenged in terms of our children, in terms of security, in terms of a lot of young boys are not being encouraged to go to school now because people are making a lot of money from agriculture, people are making a lot of money from trading. We need to take the education to where they are. The old model of people going to school has to be complemented with technology. We have to make education systems to become more resilient to future crises. COVID-19 has taught us a lot, and the world has taken a lot of learnings to it. The digital players have to bring also models that work for sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm really glad that we're seeing a lot of governments working with MNOs in Africa looking at non-internet-based Edtech. So it's not necessarily about having a smart device. We're seeing people do IVR, which is voice. It reaches a lot of people. It helps the parents also in terms of supporting the children at home. We're seeing SMS. We're seeing things that are very, very Africa-centric, and they're delivering the kind of results that we want in sub-Saharan Africa. There's still a lot of work to be done regarding the cost of devices. There's still a lot of work to be done in digital literacy, both at the teacher level and at the student level. MNOs working with governments are doing a lot of this. I know that, for instance, MNOs in Rwanda are working with the Ministry of ICT in Rwanda on a digital literacy program. This will have a significant impact on uptake of EdTech services for both children and, more importantly, for their parents also in terms of supporting them. So we're looking at all sorts of blended learning models with technology. We're not saying that, look, the classroom experience is out of the window. We're looking at how can MNOs bring solutions? How can people in the EdTech space bring solutions that complement what is going on in the classroom? How can we continue to support the teachers in the classroom, make sure that everybody's relevant, everybody's carried along? We see a big future for EdTech. We see EdTech helping people like the Honorable Minister to achieve their objectives in the different countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Technology is not a replacement for schools. In-school education offers essential tools for life. We recognize that, and we seek to complement that with technology.
Thank you so much for that. You know, really, really great points. And one that really has stuck with me is take the education to where people are. So instead of them expecting them to meet education where it is, it's really understanding the context, the local realities, and taking it there, taking it to the people. Let me come back to you, Minister, and we're nearly coming towards the wrap up. Picture for us what success looks like. Already Rwanda has done an incredible amount in delivering and working towards, effective and efficient education technology for teaching and learning. What for you would be success in this particular space?
Thank you very much. I think in education, I think what we are all looking for is for us to be able to help these kids achieve what they are at school to learn, right? So that they are able to perform at their grade level, that they are able to be productive members of our society. So I think this is what we are looking for as educators now. What successful technology or EdTech is going to look like, it's going to be a technology or a combination of all these efforts that's going to help us get there, right? So that is going to help us give these kids the education that they deserve. So if you look at the Edtech, you can look at it in all different pillars that we talked about here. It's going to be in terms of access, and access is going to be in terms of connectivity and devices. So, and then content, and then the ability of teachers to effectively use technology to teach. So if we look at all those pillars and strengthen them and use them effectively to a degree where they can help these children achieve at their grade level and be productive members of their society, then I think we'll be looking at a successful deployment of EdTech. If you look at the schools that we have, you can look at different measures, including the numbers of schools that are connected. You can look at the numbers of devices that have been deployed. All these things are very important, right? So, but I think the most important metric is how are those things being used to transform the lives of these children in school? So, because we have seen some of the, and it's not only in Rwanda, but it's also all over, where you can have devices, you can have connectivity, but those things will not translate into learning outcomes. So, and this is a problem that we have to solve. To me, success will be our ability to even translate the few things that we have into successful learning outcomes. Right. So, but I'm glad that we are also getting there in terms of numbers. If you look at the numbers of schools that we are connecting, it's increasing. And Like talked about the Giga project. And in Rwanda, I'm happy that we have actually begun actually implementing the project, because we have done our initial surveys. We have identified some of the schools where we want to try this. So it is, I would say that we are on the right path. But as we increase connectivity, as we increase the number of devices, there are things that I think we should pay very close attention to. And one is the teachers, right? So we need to make sure that the teachers have the right training, that they have the right motivation to actually use technology. And we also need to make sure that they actually have the devices that they need to use. And then once we have empowered our teachers, then we think that education technology will help our kids get to the right learning outcomes. But also another thing I would want to talk about is when we talk about technology in education, we tend to think of it as internet and computers. We also need to look at other technologies other than phones and computers and internet, right? So because if you look at STEM or STEAM, there are other technologies that actually help make classrooms fun. Right, so if you see, for instance, kids who are building robots, right? So it doesn't require internet or computers, but they are learning how they can actually build even the technology we are talking about, right? So, and if you see kids who are using these play materials to make sure that their brains is awakened, that they are able to think critically, these are all the technologies or the types of technologies that we need to bring in a classroom and make sure that we are looking at a holistic solution, right? So because I think the biggest mistake that we can make is to invest in partial solutions, right? So you can have connectivity, but connectivity requires devices, right? So connected devices require a teacher who can use that technology, right? A teacher with connected devices needs the right content, right? So we need to make sure that whatever intervention that we do, we accompany it with all those other complementary solutions that are going to make a full experience for our children.
Fantastic, thank you. The holistic approach is required. The worst thing we could do is invest in segments of what is a much bigger picture. Tell us, what does success look like for you if we get education technology right in this region? What could it mean?
Well, that means the world, of course. It will make it's a game changer, right? It is something that will mean that all the learners, especially children, but also older learners, can take charge of their own learning paths. Now, the issue is with younger learners, there is a fixed path because, they have to go through the education. But if they can be very active in their own learning through interactive games, to formative assessments, because the teachers are much more agile with them, to learn skills and content, then I think it's a game changer, because then you have a generation that really can actively learn, find opportunities to learn, is curious, find solutions for problems. So, I mean, that would be the world, and it would be exciting, right? And I hope we get there. There's so in that way, I fully agree with the minister that what we want is every child to learn to the fullest potential. And for that, every child needs to be seen within the wider education system as an individual with opportunities and different learning paths. And technology informed teachers is an important actor, and technology can help the informed teacher to get that individual needs out and to create that awareness of the child. And I think that is amazing if we manage. But I also want to raise here something that we didn't yet pick up, is that also children with special needs can then, of course, get that individual attention. And we all know that children with special needs, there's many, and it's not always visible which kids have special needs. We have a lot of ranges of different forms of inabilities. And that kind of individual attention is, of course, key for those children not to drop out and be sitting at home and then, not being able to develop themselves. So I think the technology opens a lot of doors, and especially if it goes hand in hand with having teachers to be empowered to use the technology to the optimum. Besides that, I fully agree that, we should not, like you said, we should not have perfect connectivity in the middle of nowhere where there's no electricity, because that won't make sense, right? So we have to constantly check in with each other, connect like we do now in this show, to make sure where are you, what needs to be done, what will be the next gap, and we move together as a society towards making sure that child gets actually access and will learn. And that would be a big success.
Thank you for that, Wale. Can we get there? They say that disruption and challenges is the greatest opportunity for transformation and change, right? Are we grabbing this opportunity with both hands as a continent, and can we get there?
I'm very confident that we can get there. And a lot of the developments in sub-Saharan Africa point very clearly to that direction. One, we're seeing a lot of collaboration between different ministries in different governments. So if you look at a country like Rwanda, the Ministry of Education and the ICT Ministry, they speak the same language. They understand what each needs to do to deliver the gains. So we're seeing those kind of collaborations working. We're seeing very good public-private partnership in a lot of other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. We're seeing governments and policymakers working with mobile network operators, people in the Edtech space. We're seeing MNOs and Edtech people bring in zero rating, SMS-based education. We're seeing government allowing the use of universal service funds to drive the demand side. We're seeing governments like Nigeria, for instance, with its new broadband policy, taking broadband to the nooks and crannies, ensuring that we bridge the historical quality difference between public and private schools. We're seeing that government is beginning to invest in demand side in terms of content, in terms of books, in terms of devices. These are all the building blocks to deliver the kind of education that we want for our children. So I'm very, very confident that with greater partnership, partnerships with universities, partnership with international multilateral organizations, we will definitely get there.
I'm optimistic as we wind up. Thank you all so much. I see light at the end of the tunnel. We're going through incredibly tough times. As a continent, we've seen our schools, close, open, close again, and we are experiencing waves. But I am optimistic now. As we close, I'll just ask each of you to give us a parting shot on this agenda. Leave us with words of wisdom that really keep us energized for this journey ahead. Laika, maybe I'll begin with you.
Definitely, let's believe in the kids and make sure that we do our utter best, that they don't become the biggest victims of the current crisis and no investment enough in education. So I would say kids are made to learn. They love to learn. They love to be exposed to new things. They're curious. You give them something, they make two things out of it. And I think that is our, motivation. If we make sure that they're able to take it with both hands, they will do so. And then it will fly by itself. So, we owe it to the children, and for sure, we will get there. But with a lot of investment and commitment, no doubt. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Wale?
I'd like to end by saying that, yes, we can see light at the end of the tunnel, but we cannot, as all stakeholders, take our foot off the pedal right now. We must continue to drive greater collaboration between the actors. We must avoid the mistakes of the past where we have tended to do a lot of things in silos. We must bring together all the players in every sector of the economy to deliver the kind of education that we want to give to our children. We must understand that it has to be bespoke. It has to be specially tailored for vulnerable children, for girls, for those living with physical challenges and disability. These are all the things that we must do. We must make sure that government is working with the private sector. Government is channeling its resources in the right place. Government is giving the private sector the encouragement that the private sector needs to continue to invest in access, in content, in delivery, in devices. Government must work hard to bring down the cost of devices. Government must look at new models to ensure that devices can get into the hands of our children and the parents at affordable prices. And so there's so much that we can do, but this is how I'd like to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And Minister, you have the final word.
Thank you very much. I would like to end on three things. And first, we need to recognize the opportunity that Edtech presents to improve the learning experience for our children. And once we have recognized that opportunity, we need to be able to change and to change in a big way. Right? So because we need to be able to seize this opportunity, we need to be able to look at what we have been doing and see if we can improve and make sure that we include all these technologies and all these opportunities that are being brought up today. And third, we need to be able to build partnerships because everyone talked about it here. This we need heavy investments. This we need all of us to come together and build complete solutions. And as I said before, we need to make sure that we have a holistic approach to this. And we need to do all of this while thinking about the learning outcomes for our children, because at the end of the day, I like to say that these are our bosses. We are working for these children, and we need to make sure that we do not spare any effort in bringing everything together and to make sure that we give them the best education that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to close the discussion. These are our bosses. That's true servant leadership, right? We serve these young people on the continent, and we must do our best for them. Thank you for joining the conversation on EdTech Monday. We look forward to having you with us once again next month, where we'll be looking at how the pandemic has shifted perceptions of parents and students when it comes to education technology. The question is, has it? If so, how? Join us next month for that conversation. And to learn more about secondary education in Africa, do read the Secondary Education in Africa report from the Mastercard Foundation. Details on your screen now. Thank you for joining us. See you again next month.